complicated ideas actually function in our real world. Today, on Thursday, October 8th, we are going to be talking about the we versus I articulation in relation to the vice presidential debate that many of us witnessed last night. And I'm sure if you're anything like me, you found last night's debate a little bit of a relief that we didn't have so much yelling and screaming and interruptions, although there were plenty of those. Of course, this was not a perfect debate. What's kind of interesting about this debate was, and this goes back, by the way, to what I mentioned several weeks ago, that you need to be aware and you need to pay attention to those things that are left unsaid. And indeed, both of the candidates, Vice President Pence as well as Senator Harris, they both left things unsaid. And sometimes they didn't answer a question at all. And there are many reasons for this. Of course, maybe they're not comfortable saying it because they think it might hurt their political position. B, they were too involved with the last thing that was said that they wanted to use their time that was allotted to them to address what was left unsaid. And three, sometimes people don't have a really good idea about how they're going to handle a situation. And rather than, of course, giving an answer, they remain silent. All of these things, of course, happened during the debate. But what I found most interesting about the debate in relation to what our topic is this week, which is this understanding about how we make decisions and how those decisions that we make are deeply rooted in our value system. And there was some real specific comments made during the debate that I think clarifies the different way of thinking between conservatives and liberals, or also liberals and libertarians, and how these values really direct the way the questions were answered and the emphasis that was placed. One of the things that we saw was a very specific difference between two ethical reasoning thought processes. One is called egoism, and the other one is called utilitarianism. Now, egoism is based upon this idea, and I know I've said this before, so bear with me if you've already heard it, but it's based upon this idea that my needs come first. And we basically don't cross the line of selfishness to become selfish, that is, with our egoism, by realizing that taking care of often other people's needs also takes care of our needs. So if you are a long-term consequential thinker, and both of these kind of philosophies fall under the roof, if you will, of what we call consequentialism, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But that means we're looking at the consequences of our actions. And the consequences fall into two major categories, if you will, the short-term consequences versus long-term consequences. Egoism works best when we are looking at long-term consequences, how my actions might impact others and how those others will then turn around and treat me. When we think in the way of short-term consequences, we often forget to think about others and how our decisions might impact them and thereby turn around and smack us back in the face when we're least expecting it. For the most part, I think Americans tend to think in short-term consequences. There are many reasons for this, but ultimately we are trained to think about our own needs. And we are really trained by, well, the commercialism in our culture. If you buy this product, you're going to feel more happy. If you buy that product, this is going to bring gratification. I want information now about what I'm looking for, so I'm going to search on the internet rather than go to the library and look up several different books. Where we get our information, what we're looking for, how quickly we have decided that we need whatever it is that we need at the time, tends to really go into the short-term category. Conservatives are more within the egoistic camp. And this is not to say that all conservatives or libertarians are selfish. Again, it depends upon whether or not we are considering the long-term consequences of our actions and how it will affect other people, and thereby how other people will then turn around and impact us. So egoism isn't really necessarily bad. I mean, when you are really hungry and you say, I got to make a meal right now, I got to take care of myself, that is a form of egoism. When we say in our society, for example, we have to take care of ourselves before we are able to take care of others, that too is a form of egoism. And yet, very few of us will think that those things are bad things. You've got to eat. And if you are too sick to care for others, then you're not going to be able to care for others very well. So egoism isn't necessarily a bad thing, although I think that we are often trained to think of it as a bad thing. And that's because egoism can slide down into selfishness. It can go there very quickly, especially if we are only reacting, if we're not becoming the observer, an alert observer of life and its functionings. That's when it becomes a problem. But ultimately, egoism is a viable way to live one's life and to make decisions. Utilitarianism, and we're going to talk about these ideas a little bit more on Friday, but utilitarianism is this idea that we are weighing the consequences of our actions in such a way that we hope to benefit the most amount of people possible. Now, both egoism and utilitarianism leave people out. If you are egotistical in the sense of short-term reasoning and you make a decision based upon your own needs and your own wants, you're going to leave a lot of people out of that equation. And sometimes you're not even going to bother to think about the people who have been left out. Likewise, utilitarianism, when you are trying to make the best decision to benefit the most amount of people, there are also people who are going to be left out. And it might include you. And that's part of the negotiation of consequences that we find ourselves in whenever we're using either one of these different forms of reasoning. And reasoning is really, really, really rooted to our deep-rooted value system. And we saw this a great deal during the debate last night. So let me look at the we versus I, the egotism versus consequentialism of utilitarianism that we found in both of these candidates that had the debate. So one of the interesting things that I heard from Pence was this idea that the president and I really do believe that the American people, and we trust the American people, to make their own decisions about their health. Now, this was a reply to the moderator regarding about whether or not it should be important for President Trump to wear a mask whenever he has returned now to the White House in the Oval Office. So there's the discussion about the Rose Garden and whether or not it was responsible for the government to hold an event in the Rose Garden where the seats were so close together, where people were not practicing social distancing, where nobody pretty much was wearing a mask. And the reply is, we trust, the president and I trust the American people to make the best decision for their health. This is, I have hands off on the responsibility here. This is an egotism response. The egotism response says each individual needs to take care of their own needs, and it is not up to me to tell people what to do. And this is also a very libertarian argument. Libertarians believe in ultimate freedom, and libertarianism should not be confused with liberalism. These are two very, very distinct ideas that sometimes we confuse because it comes from the same word, this idea of freedom. So libertarians believe that they need to maximize their freedom, and that's what they think the United States has been based upon, that I have the freedom to make money, that I should not be forced to pay taxes that doesn't benefit me if I decide I don't want to. So I shouldn't be forced to pay money for certain things. I don't have kids, so why should I be paying taxes to support a school system when I'm never going to benefit from that system? Now, libertarians, just like Democrats, just like socialists, just like any political variety out there, they have this whole narrow versus wide scope of a belief system. Many people in the libertarian camp will agree that it is okay to give my money to taxes that will support the school, because for those libertarians, they think to themselves, well, what happens if the schools don't have enough funding and we end up raising young people who cannot reason, who cannot think for themselves? And then how is that negatively going to affect society? And conversely, how is that negatively going to affect me? So again, the scope of belief is wide. It goes from narrow to wide, and there's a huge variety in between, and everybody has a little bit of a different take on it. But the overall understanding of these ideas, the overall understanding that I should have ultimate freedom and it should be left to me to decide how much of that freedom I'm going to give up, that's the underlying basis. So what we saw from Senator Harris was a very different kind of point of view. Instead of throwing all the responsibility either on the states or all the responsibilities on the individual to mandate, take care of, decide about how the pandemic and how we should function in the pandemic should look like, Senator Harris and Joe Biden, Vice President Joe Biden, they both believe that we, the people, in the Constitution tends to suggest that the government itself has to take care of everybody. So it needs to be a more we decision. People elect us. They think that we're the good ones or the right ones to make decisions for the rest of the people in this country. And thereby we have a responsibility to all of the people to make a decision that will protect everyone, i.e. lockdowns, i.e. everybody, no matter who you are, should be practicing social distancing, i.e. everybody, no matter who you are, should be wearing a mask. And then the mask issue then can also be seen in this articulation. A lot of times you'll see liberals, Democrats, people who may be leaning towards some socialist thought. And as I say that word, I would like to emphasize that we don't really have socialism in this country. We may have some socialistic inspired ideas, such as Obamacare, but it's not socialistic. It's not even close to socialistic. It doesn't even knock on the door of socialism. Okay, so that's really, really important to understand, but it's based on the spirit of socialized medicine. And so what we see with this idea of the masks, okay, is you'll see a lot of liberals saying, I wear this mask to protect others. And I know you've heard this in the news a lot. You probably have heard this from your friends or families. And then you have the I articulation, the egoistic articulation that says, I wear the mask only to protect myself when I need to. And we saw this demonstrated particularly in the presidential debate, the very first one, when President Trump had a mask. He took it out of his pocket and he said, I have a mask and I use it when I think I need it. This is an I egoistic point of view. So what's the point of making these distinctions? And it's actually a very important thing because honestly, these are how decisions are made. If we look at the idea of capitalism, which there's always a great debate about whether or not capitalism is a good idea. And we saw this in the discussion during last night's debate. From USA Today, they said Biden and Trump have laid out very different economic plans. Trump has promised more tax cuts and deregulation, plus additional tariffs against other nations. This is an individualistic I articulation point of view. Biden's plan would increase the corporate tax rate and raise capital gain taxes for those earning more than $1 million, though he has pledged not to raise taxes for those earning less than $400,000 a year. So Biden's camp is more on the we articulation basis. We need to tax people who have tons of money in order to take care of the whole. Whereas Trump and Pence say, well, everybody has their right to make a lot of money. Everybody has the freedom to decide how their money is going to be spent. So we're not going to tax the more wealthy group of people in this country because that would be unfair. That would be infringing upon their freedom of rights. Now, the Constitution has both the we and the I embedded in it. And from I was going to say spiritual, but that's the wrong word. From a practical point of view, we say we the people, but we limit the we in the United States. The I is far more prevalent in our lives, and we're raised with it. From the moment we are born, we are told how important we are. When we make a bad decision as a young person, we're saying, see what the consequences is here? It's up to you to make better choices. We rarely talk about the we in general in the United States, even though we the people is the line that we all beckon to. It is very difficult to articulate the differences between the we and the I, and to negotiate how much I for everybody should be part of the decision-making processes of the United States versus how much we. And in general, there's been I would say, a smear campaign against we for many years. Look at how this country views socialism, for example. Socialism, as opposed to capitalism, is about making sure that everybody has what they need, no matter who you are. It is a decision-making process from an economic point of view in which we say, hey, what is the least amount everybody has an inalienable right to? Is it not to starve? Is it to have a house? Is it to provide everybody with health care? If it is to provide everybody with health care, what type of health care should every individual have a basic right to that we should provide? So that is very different than capitalism, which is built upon this idea of competition. And once you have this idea of competition, you're pitting people against each other. And then you're saying it is their right, it is their freedom to win or lose. If they work really hard, they're probably going to win. We've heard this argument a million times. But the problem with competition is we forget very easily how we are successful as a result of other people's action. So when we looked at the debate last night, or when I looked at the debate last night, what I saw was this competing ideology between Democrats and Republicans regarding how the decisions should be made in this country. Now, depending upon what camp you fall into, you're probably either going to be a Democrat or a conservative, a liberal or a conservative. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what you need to be aware of is the whys. Why do I think my rights trump somebody else's rights? Or why do I think I should have the same rights as everybody else and we should care for everybody else, and that I should care for others even if it may look negatively on me? So this is an introduction, if you will, of what we call consequential versus non-consequential reasoning. And tomorrow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick overview of the different philosophical ideas that fall under these two columns of consequential reasoning versus non-consequential reasoning, the I versus the we articulation, and how it plays out in everyday life. And before we get to our meditation today, I really want to take a few minutes to give a very exciting announcement. And I'm super, super excited about this announcement, but it is going to change my format here, where I broadcast 4 days a week. First of all, after consulting with a few people, I'm going to be moving some of this work over to my Patreon page, which is going to be established over the weekend. And what's really exciting about this is that the podcasts are going to be far more polished. We'll have some visuals there. We'll have some music. We'll also, you'll see my logo, the whole 9 yards. So they're going to be more polished. And I'm still going to give at least once a week, a podcast that is free to everybody, that is broadcasted over all of these channels. But that's not going to start for a couple weeks. So this Friday is going to be the last live 4-day-a-week podcast that I give. And then we're going to slowly but surely change over to these other platforms. And what's exciting about this for myself, and I hope for some of you as well, is that we're going to look at a variety of topics. We're going to look at communication and philosophy, ethics to Ayurveda, and that's a 5,000-year-old health system that helps us align our body and mind to our needs throughout the world. We're also I'm going to have a special meditation level. So if you're really into meditation and you want to explore more, we're going to explore everything from guided meditation to mantra meditation. And there's going to be a lot more goodies in the mix as well. I'm going to have worksheets provided for people. We'll have open discussions and so on and so forth. But before that happens, I have just placed in the chat not only some of the articles I looked at, but I want you to take a look at this discussion group that has been started by an acquaintance of mine. And basically, it is a discussion held around a certain particular topic. It's held online, and there's a variety of people who are participating. There's conservatives, there's libertarians, there's liberals, there's socialists. We have a variety of people who are participating in these discussions, and you too can participate. It would be really exciting to be able to see you in person as well. So I have a link here from the Let's Talk sign-up page, and I want to encourage you to sign up because it really is a nice open environment in which we can all explore ideas without feeling like we're being shot down simply because we have a different point of view. And with that said, I invite you all to take a seat or to lie down, whatever your preference is. If you are working or driving or, using heavy duty mechanical equipment, this is probably not the best time for you to stay with me. Take a couple deep breaths in and exhale out. I want you just to ground yourself in your space. Take a few minutes just to center yourself. Place your hands on your abdomen area and take a deep breath all the way deep into your core for maybe a count of 5. And then you're going to hold for a count of 1 or 2. And then I want you to exhale for a count of 6 or 7. Just quiet your mind by focusing on your breath. If you have any thoughts, maybe there's noises in your environment, or if you're experiencing physical sensations, just recognize that they exist, and then gently bring your attention back to your breath. This practice of focusing on our breath, or maybe an image, a candlelight, and then recognizing but not getting involved in the thoughts or feelings and sensations that come to us. This is the practice of being mindful, of becoming that observer in your life, which offers you a great deal of freedom of choice of how to react, how to be. Now I want you to bring your breath to your heart center and focus on breathing right in the center. And imagine that with each breath, your heart enlarges. Your love, your gratitude that comes from the heart, that is, enlarges and encompasses your body, your soul. How we reason and how we make decisions tends to control or direct our lives. To understand where these deep-rooted values come from then gives us the ability to actively make choices rather than simply reacting. It is, in a sense, opportunity, this awareness that we're starting to develop to become the observer. If you are an I person, that's fine. But remember that the consequences of your actions doesn't just impact you. It impacts the people around you, your friends and your family, and sometimes even your community. So as you are focusing on your I value system, imagine about how you can make decisions that look at larger consequences. If you are a we kind of person, if your life is really about maximizing the good for the most amount of people, try to consider what the most amount of people means to you. How does that sphere narrow or widen, depending upon the choices that are on your plate? Now bring your attention back to the heart center and take a deep breath in. And as you exhale, exhale all those things that will not serve you today, that will not help you align your day to your values and your needs and the needs of those people in your sphere of life. Inhale light and exhale those things that no longer serve you. Tomorrow, we're going to look at the difference between consequential versus non-consequential reasoning and how they function in everyday life. We'll also be using some of the Facebook posts that I received from various listeners about their values and their worldview as ways to help us better understand these value systems that we walk with and often forget that we're walking with them every day. I thank you all for your attention, for your presence, and as always, I wish to give you a wonderful, I'm just typing something in, a wonderful aloha as well as a mahalo for your time today. And again, as always, namaste. I'd love to hear from you. Reach out to the Alignment with Rebecca page and join the conversation. And also take a look at the Let's Talk link that I just posted in the discussion. I look forward to seeing you there. Have a great day. Take care of yourself. And again, namaste.